In this match masterclass, we are taking a look at a method that allows you to beat the pole anglers. So if you are a rod and line match angler, this is going to be the episode for you. Okay then, so what method am I on about where you can beat the pole anglers? Well, let's start off with being incredibly honest. Pole fishing is so popular because it is that good. I use it myself a lot, but I know there's an awful lot of people who, one, either don't own a pole, or two, just don't particularly enjoy it and you would prefer to fish a rod and line. So I want to give you a tactic where you can compete with those very, very good pole anglers. And it's not going to be a tactic that you've not seen before because we are fishing the method feeder. I think on the rod and line, maybe the method feeder and the pellet waggler are going to be your two best friends when it comes to catching fish. They catch fish everywhere and everybody knows how good they are. But there's definitely something that anglers are missing when fish the method feeder, and that is what we're doing today. So we'll go through rigs and baits and everything in a bit, but the most important thing is when you're fishing a method feeder, normally people are chucking it to the far side, in the middle of the lake and stuff like that. But what you're missing out on is that absolute mega line that the pole anglers take a huge advantage of. And what I'm talking about is that line just there, about 5, 6, 7 meters, where a lot of anglers fish on the pole, a lot of bait gets fed. It's an incredibly good area to catch carp, and it allows you to feed it as well. So normally what you're thinking on a normal method feeder, you're casting it a long way away. You can't feed bait there. So you never really build up that really mega peg with loads and loads of fish in there, which you can do on the pole. So this is all going to be about fishing short and fishing areas where perhaps rod and line anglers, method feeder anglers definitely neglect, but you really shouldn't. That 6 meter line, so many fish get caught there, especially at the start and then also at the end as well. Mega. The more you feed, the more competition, and the last sort of hour, 2 hours can be really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my stopwatch. It's always important to use a stopwatch whenever this style of fishing, because you definitely build up a pattern of how long it takes you to get a bite and also how regularly we're going to feed. So loads more of that to come, but I want to see if we can catch another one. So let's sit here, watch this tip eagerly, and hopefully it's not going to be too long for another one absolutely drags that rod in, because everything is so close. It's fair to say that fishing at this close range, the bites are electric, and you do need to be geared up for that. So be ready for bites that absolutely rip it off the rest. And because we are fishing here at Decoy and we're on Oak Lake, normally the fish are pretty decent size as well. This one actually, although it's not small, for Decoy Oak Lake, you would class this as pretty small. So what I'm going to do is let's hopefully it's going to behave and we can just have a very quick look. There we go. Yeah, for Oak Lake, that is strangely a small fish. Whee, that was close. What I'll do is we'll get this one slipped back and then we'll talk to you about the rig and the tackle you need to fish in this particular style. So then let's get serious into talking about this actual method and the rig we're using. Now actually the rig doesn't really need much introduction because it's more about how you feed it, where we're fishing it and stuff like that. So like I said, it's a short range method feeder. Now there's two different styles of method feeder really. There's the flatbed feeder, which is what I've got on here, or there's the hybrid / alloy feeder. If I get that hook out of my hand, then these are basically a method feeder with sides. So they would keep bait on a lot better. If I was casting, then 95% of the time I use an alloy / hybrid feeder. But because we're fishing literally an underarm swing at like 5 or 6 meters, I actually go for a flatbed feeder. And that's for one reason. Basically, if you've watched any of the underwater videos, the Guru one is very good, it springs to mind. What they find is that once your bait comes off the feeder and your hook bait is just off rather than being on top, the bites are definitely quicker. So because I'm not getting an impact on the water, I think with a flatbed style feeder, it's just going to break down quicker and my hook bait is going to kick off to the side quicker than it would with an alloy feeder. That's the only reason I've gone for that, and I've gone for a medium 30 gram. I've got 0.23 as a hook link, and that's 4 inches, so it's really strong. Like I said, they're big fish, the bites are wicked. A size 12 hook, that's on a bait band, because what we're doing there is we're just slipping a pellet under the bait band. I have got some soaked up wires as well, but we'll go through to bait in a moment. But I have got some yellow hook baits which we can change to. Now the only other addition to the rig is this here, which is a blob of putty. Now carp anglers use putty an awful lot, and that's very, very heavy, and I have that about a foot away from where my feeder is, purely because you don't want to spook fish with liners. I think if there's anything that spooks fish, it's line touching the fins, touching their body, and because we're at such an aggressive angle from my tip down to where we're fishing, it's quite often you're going to get a lot of contact with your line. If I was casting it, that isn't so aggressive, and I think your line perhaps sinks better than it does if you're fishing like right close, so I don't think that's a necessity if you're casting. Now I'm going to go through baits and everything shortly, but loading the method feeder, I don't nip it on as hard as I would as if I was casting. Like I said, I'm really keen to get this coming off of that feeder pretty much as soon as it hits the bottom. Like I said, and as for casting, just a gentle underarm, and there we go. It's probably 6 or 7 meters, I would say. So while I'm now putting this on the rest, there's a couple of other things to mention. First thing is I don't put a bend in my rod. I mean a very, very small one. I want that line to be sunk. I want it to be out the way, and that means hopefully there's going to be less fish scared from the line. Secondly, set yourself a loose clutch. Like I said, if you're not watching these rods, they will have it in. It's so close, there's no stretch. So setting your clutch and just waiting for those absolute rip rounds, that is what you're waiting for. And lastly, while we're on a tackle, I've got a 10-foot rod. I've got the Advanta Pro bomb rod in 10 foot. 10 foot is very, very good because you're just swinging it underarm. And the second thing you'll notice, and I'll try and touch back on this when I'm playing one, you'll notice with a 10-foot rod, when you're playing fish, they come up to be netted really close to your feet. If you're playing them on a 12-foot rod, it's amazing how much further they are out. That means you're playing and netting fish over pretty much where you're fishing. So I think a 10-foot rod is very, very important. I've got a standard 3,000 or 4,000 fixed ball reel, and I've got 8-pound mainline on there. That is because I want it to be super, super strong. So that is all in there fishing. We've got very little bend in the rod. I've just started my stopwatch. Like I said, I think it's really important to have a stopwatch. That has been in, or that bite just came there just under 10 minutes. So hopefully we might be able to catch another one. What I'm going to do now is talk a little bit through feeding, and it's worth mentioning that this method is exceptionally good at the start. There's always fish on that short line at the start, and also a bit of a liner there. Also, as we're fishing and as you put more baiting, at the end is mega. So there may be periods throughout the day where you have to come off this, which is definitely what I will talk you through. But let's go about feeding. Now you might be wondering why I've got a catapult in my hand when we're fishing like 5 or 6 meters. It's for 2 very good reasons. One is it feeds very, very tight together. It's very, very neat. Like you're talking like dinner plate spread. Rather than throwing by hand, I think I can get more accurate with a catapult. And second, I can regulate how much I'm using. So I've got the small slit catapult here, and I can feed a full pouch, bam, straight over the top of where we're feeding. And I actually always feed 2. So there you go, 2 pouches. So catapult, 1, it's nice and tight, and 2, I can regulate how much I'm feeding. So if I was catching loads of fish, I could up that to 3 pouches, 4 pouches, or if I was catching less, I can drop it down to 1. So it's almost like a measure as well as a very accurate way of fishing. That's the reason why I used the catapult. And how often you feed it, you have to plan that by how well you're catching. So I mean, probably every five minutes I would be putting a couple of pouches out, because that's what you would be doing on the pole. You're trying to build up a really good area where lots of fish are getting drawn in by the noise. And lastly, that's the second reason why I fish 2 pouches at the same time. If you're fishing a pole here, you quite often could catch fish throughout the water. You get a nice slow sink and hook bait. You can catch them just off the bottom and stuff like that. But on the method, you can't. So you need to get them pinned down. So I don't really need to feed now, but I'm going to do it anyway. So 2 pouches, what that does is it gets a larger quantity of bait down to the bottom in one go. If I was to spread that out, and if I was to just trickle in 3 or 4 pellets all the while, what that's going to do is encourage the fish to come up in the water, start competing, and you're probably not going to catch them fishing like this. So that's the reason for catapult. That's why I do it in 2 pouches. There's definitely fish there, although I've not got much tension in this tip. I'll take a bit out. I can just see enough to see that there's a few fish feeding. So hopefully it's not going to be too long, and another one is going to absolutely fly off the rest. But like I said, it's a very good place to start, and if it does go quiet, then there's other things that we can do. So let's see how long this one takes, if we get a bite at all. But cast wise, I'm going to give it about 10 minutes probably maximum, 10 or 12 minutes per cast max, before we start thinking about different hook baits, different baits on the feeder and stuff like that. So let's give this a few more minutes and see if we have to catch that rod again before it flies in. So that has been out there just over 10 minutes. So I'm going to refresh it, and don't be afraid to keep refreshing on here. Like I said, the fish are big in here. We don't need many of them on this method, but in a normal fishing situation, if you were casting it, you'd probably be doing it more regularly than that, probably every 5 or 10 minutes. And although we are feeding to attract fish here, sometimes your feeder can just be sitting funny, stuff like it's amazing what a recast can do. And don't be afraid to switch it up to what you're using as well. I've been started on the pellets, now going to try a bit of a ground bait and pellet mix, and I'm going to go through baits in much more detail shortly. But the main thing is to keep nice and active, because like I said, it's definitely a method that just gets better and better the more you work at it and the longer that you fish it for. So let's get this one set again. Remember, loosen that clutch off. We don't want any rods getting towed in. Make sure there's not too much of a bend in the tip. And now we can feed those pellets again. So like I said before, it's 2 pouches. So 1 straight over the top, and then straight away to try and get as much bait as I can to the bottom without drawing them up in the water, the second pouch there again. So the trap is basically reset. Let's reset the stopwatch, and I'm going to give this one another 10 minutes and see what happens. And I'm going to feed again at about halfway through. Like I said, this is a method that is very good at the start. Sometimes it does go quiet, which it may be in that process now, but I think that we had enough sort of indication on tip there that there's going to be one willing to pick up this hook bait now. So let's see what happens on this chuck. And that right there is exactly why you have a rejug every now and again. 2 minutes and 34 seconds that bite, and the one before that had been there 10 minutes. Had it been sitting wrong, you don't know. I mean, perhaps the change to a bit of ground bait and a bit of pellet, there's so many variables, but it's definitely worth, like I said, keeping nice and active. This feels like it's potentially going to be one of those decoy big uns again. And this is what I was saying, I said I'd touch on it back earlier. Good memory me, I'll give myself credit for that. Look where this fish is fighting. It is literally like half a meter away from my staging. Honestly, if you play a fish in a 12-foot rod, it's coming up like so much further. And it's weird because this is a 10-foot. Stop talking to you. I should have stopped talking to you then. Sorry, this is a 10-foot rod, and they just pop up so incredibly close compared to a 12-foot. And although there's only 2-foot difference in the rods, I don't know what it is, but that makes a big difference. So excuse that awful piece of netting. I was more interested in talking to you about where the fish is popping up. That is absolutely demolished it. That's so far back. That one was not coming off. That could even be a disgorger job, I think. Let's just get this out 2 seconds. He's not very happy with us. It's not very often you get a method feeder that has gone down that far. That really wanted it. Right, okay. Let's see if we can unwrap him in the line. And we're going to have another one to show you, like I said, and it's literally taken a couple of minutes. I don't know if this one's going to play ball, and let me hold it up. Let's risk it. There we go. A proper decoy fish. Probably another £8 probably I'm going to give myself. I'm sure it's going to let me hold. Come on. Yeah, and they are just big fish in here. Sometimes they can go well into like 10-15 pounds, but I would say this is sort of like the average what you can catch. The one we caught earlier you would class as a smaller fish, but there you go. A couple of minutes fishing on the rechuck, and another, if we were fishing a match, £8 in the keep net. Another one returned safely. Now this is probably going to be, or sound, quite weird, because I've just been talking about how good fishing short on a method feeder is, and it is amazing, but let's be honest, we're fishing on our own here. If it was a match situation, I've already said a couple of times, this is wicked at the start, and it's even better at the end when it keeps building your swim up. So we're going to pretend now that it's gone a bit dead. I know we just had that bite in like 2.5 minutes on the rechuck, but let's say you're in a match situation and you didn't have this luxury of catching all the while. What would I do? Well, all I would do is I would just take off my putty, and we are now fishing exactly how pretty much everyone fishes a method feeder. And I wouldn't be afraid of casting where I think fish would be. Now, if I was fishing a method normally, and a lot of you would, I think you'd be casting up that bank underneath the tree. It's too far away to feed, but there should be fish there, you know what I mean? So you don't actually have to change anything. And I labelled this video at the start, how to beat the pole anglers. Well, I think you have to be versatile, and the same as if you were pole fishing, you have to change a few things around. So yes, we are going to drop back on this short line, and yes, you should definitely be feeding it, but there is occasions where you're going to have to come off it, and it'd be stupid of me not to acknowledge that, and you know, sort of just try and make people sit on this line all day. And if there's not a lot of fish there, obviously if you're getting a bite every 10 minutes is fine. If it's getting dragged in every 10 minutes, keep doing it. But like I said, we're pretending now that we're not. So all I've done is just remove that putty, and we're just going to fish how we fish the method feeder anywhere. We're just going to fish up that bank, casting distance, and give yourself a little bit of time to catch fish in other locations. But what you are going to do, now this is super important, is don't neglect what we've been doing, which is fishing short. So now you're resting it, you've got no lines in the water. The main thing to do is keep that feed going in, because all you're doing is making this line better and better, and more fish that feed there confidently without getting caught and anything like that, that's when it gets really, really good. So for the next, if you're in a match situation, let's say, I'd fish somewhere else, try and catch a few fish. That's what I'm going to do now, but keep feeding that area. And trust me, when you go back on it, certainly the last 2 hours of match or something like that, it is absolutely amazing at times. So catch a few early ones, then you might have to search around, which is what we're going to do now. But we're going to drop back on that shortly, and I'm pretty convinced we'll catch one pretty quick. So let's try and catch a couple, let's say in a conventional way, and we'll catch up shortly back on the short line. So there you go, you've caught a few fish elsewhere. We're going to fast forward now and pretend that you've just caught, perhaps casting in the middle, around your peg basically, like you would in a match, but all the while you've been feeding that close line, and this is hopefully where it now gets really, really good. It doesn't do it all the while because that is, that's fishing, but many of the times fish start to come down this closer edge to you where you've been feeding. It's where the pole anglers catch late. Like I said, early and late is a real good time for this method. But all I'm going to do is reattach that blobber putty literally like a foot away from where I'm fishing, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the baits as well. But what I'll do is I'll get out there, because although we've had a short break there, we've caught a few fish casting around, we haven't given it the ultimate sort of couple of hour break that you would in a match. But like I said, it is a bit of a false scenario sometimes when you're on the lake on your own, and you can catch them a bit earlier than perhaps you'd expect. So what I've done is we'll get back out there and then we'll have a look at the bait. So like I said, it's really simple every time. A nice swing, and you just lower it in, and then make sure you set your clutch, because I've said it before, but they will have the rod off the rest. Let's pop that down there. Make sure we've got no tension. We don't want any sort of way that they can bump into that line. Remember, all that time we've been fishing, so you know that in a match situation you could have been off this line for a couple of hours, but you've kept the feed going in there, and that's when it can really, really be good. It's because they've had so much time in the swim without anyone fishing, they just get very confident. So while that's fishing, let's hope we hear that clutch go in a minute and there's one dragging it in. But let's talk to you through the baits that we've got. And everything on this tray has had a little bit of love, and what I mean by that is it's very standard, but it's a little bit boosted to make the best. So in here I've got standard 6mm swim stim pellets. They're just the amino pellets just out of the bag, but I then pimp them up a little bit myself. So cover them completely in lake water, and then in that lake water I add the swim stim pellet soak in the betaine green. I'll give them about a minute to soak in there, and I'll drain it off, and all that does is they soak in a little bit of that flavour, but it creates a little bit of a crust on the outside of the pellets as well, and I'm just convinced that creates a little bit more attraction. But don't waste that water, because in this tub here we've got the new feeder mix from Dynamite, and again it's in the betaine green flavour. So that water that was soaking those pellets gets mixed into here, give it a real good mix, and then it's so important to riddle your ground bait. So many people say, do I really need to riddle it? I'm always going to say yes. That is always the answer, because it creates this perfect light fluffy ground bait, and it means that you're just creating no lumps, and it gets on the method feeder absolutely perfect every time. And then we move on to the pellets. Again, amino swim stim pellets. These are in a 2mm, and preparing these couldn't be much more simple. Cover them completely in water and leave them for 2 minutes. Drain that water off, and then I empty them into a larger area, so a larger surface area tub. This is quite a big tub for these pellets. So leave them in there, getting plenty of air to them for perhaps 20-30 minutes. Then once they're completely ready to go, I've put on the sticky pellet syrup, that's a mouthful isn't it, in the betaine green as well, and then give them a good mix. That's another flavour boost, but also it just gives them that sort of bind together effect, and they do stick together nicely. And then the third one is just a combination of the two. So we've got pellets and ground bait, the two that I've just spoke to you, mixed together, and actually that's what has caught most fish for us today. Every day will be different. Some days you will catch on just pellets, some days you'll catch on just ground bait, and other days they want a mixture of the two. So that is definitely worth playing about. I'm just going to feed a couple more pouches because I've been talking to you for a while. Like I said, this hasn't had ages to settle, but I'm convinced they're going to be down here anytime soon. And hook baits, we have got the Wowzers in yellow. They smell absolutely amazing. If you want a bright yellow hook bait, they are really, really good. And apart from that, just standard 6mm pellets. I've got two flavours now. I've got the standard aminos and the F1 sweet as well. But hook baits is pretty much, you know, it's whatever you want. You could try maggots, worms, sweet cod, anything like that. It's more about how you're feeding it, and more importantly, where you fish it. Like I said, the match anglers, the pole anglers especially, would be feeding that peg all day, and the later it gets in the match, definitely the closer those fish come in, and you can have a real good late spell fishing just like this. And while we're talking about a late spell, what happens at the end of a match? Everybody, pretty much, certainly as the weather gets warmer, starts to feed bait down the edge. So this left edge here, this right edge here, you know, with an hour to go, I would be definitely piling quite a bit of bait down there, and you'd be expecting to catch a few fish there. So not only do you fish short, but don't neglect fishing down the edge as well. You know, you'd quite happily cast a method feeder to the far side and fish it against the bank, but not many people fish it nice and close to your own bank. And like I said, if you are going to put a plan together to beat pole anglers, you've got to fish how a pole angler would do it, and they would definitely be trying to get a lot of fish in a small area close to them so you can put a big weight together. So hopefully that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to catch a few fish on this short line. I'm sure that's going to swing around very, very soon, and I might have a little go down one of the edges to see if they've come down there as well. Well, it has really started to kick off now. Regular bites within that sort of 4 to 5 minute window. And like I said, it is a method that just gets better and better. The later it gets, the more you feed and the more competition, it really, really can kick off. But I must say, there's a rather scary black cloud over there, and it's meant to rain in about 30 minutes time. So I think I'm going to call this one the last fish. Hopefully it's going to be another nice one. These fish are quite weird at Decoy because, well, I say this one's actually pulling, but a lot of them don't normally fight, but then they beat you up when they go in the net. So let's hope that, as this one is now actually giving me a bit of trouble underneath of the rod tip, let's hope that it's going to do the opposite. Let's hope it's going to give me a bit of trouble under here, but I'm going to hold one up so you can have a look at it. Like I said, the average size is mega in here. They're just such good fish, and you don't need many when they are this size. But it's not just big fish that this works for. Literally anywhere where people catch short on the pole or down the edge on the pole, like I said, been feeding that as well, and it would 100% work down there. So it's well worth just having this line available to you if you are a rod and line angler. Like I said, I know loads of people catch on a method feeder. It's not a method that is not showing you anything new today, but it's definitely neglected in the fact that people just don't fish it this short, and this one is absolutely beating me up. I wonder if it could be a barbel, you know, there's big barbel in here, and sometimes the one that hold deep could be that. I just wonder, maybe, or just a turbocharged carp, I'm not sure. No, starting to tie. No, it's a carp. I thought it could be a barbel. I've had some barbel to about £8 in here, and they're really good fun. It feels like you've hooked a train when you hook them. There we go, one to finish on. Bang. There we go, short range method feeder in a nutshell right there. Let's like I said, hopefully now, because that one actually gave me a bit of trouble, ow, I hooked myself in the finger, hopefully he's going to let us have a look at it. Calm down. And again, another wicked decoy carp. There we go, one to finish on. I hope that we I like I said, they don't like being held up. But I hope that has given you the confidence, if you are a rod and line angler, just to have that line there a little bit shorter, a little bit closer in, because honestly, when it gets going, it is absolutely amazing. So I do hope you've enjoyed it. It's a really fun way of fishing. The bites are electric. It's an absolute catchy rod job, but it is very, very effective. So go out there and give it a go. Let us know how you get on, and we will see you very soon on the next one.